The desert has two voices. One belongs to the day, sharp, bright, cruel as a blade. The other belongs to the night, low, endless, and full of promises it cannot keep. It was the night's voice that called me. I had been following a map no scholar would dare trust, not one etched on papyrus or carved in stone, but scratched in the trembling hand of my grandfather during the final weeks of his life. He had drawn it on the back of a torn letter, the ink smudged as if by tears or sweat. I had kept it in my coat pocket for 12 years, afraid of where it might lead. The sands shifted under my boots in a way that seemed almost deliberate, as though they were making room for me to pass. The moon spilled silver across the dunes. And the stars? The stars felt close enough to pluck from the sky and keep in my palm. There was no sound except the hiss of wind through the grains. Then a dull thud. My foot had struck something not born of the earth. I knelt, brushing away the sand with fingers already numb from cold. A surface emerged, stone, warm despite the night air. The carvings appeared slowly, their shapes growing sharper with every handful I cleared. I ran my palm across them and felt each groove as though it had been cut yesterday. Hieroglyphs. I had read enough of the old tongue to know these were not words of praise or prayer. They were warnings. A single name appeared again and again, wound, between symbols for binding, chains, and silence. Amun-sekhmet, that the king who ate the dawn. The name tasted bitter in my mouth. I should have left it there, sealed beneath the centuries. But curiosity is its own curse, and I have never been free of it. By dawn, I had uncovered the outline of a doorway. Its lintel was crowned with the faces of jackals, their eyes narrow and watchful. The wind picked up then, carrying with it the faintest scent, not of decay, but of something sweet, like flowers pressed in an old book. I set up my tent nearby. The desert stillness wrapped itself around me like a shroud. I should have been exhausted from digging, but sleep took its time. When it came, it brought a dream. A throne room rose around me, lit by the orange breath of fire bits. The walls dripped with gold, and shadows leaned in like conspirators. Upon the throne sat a figure, wrapped in linen darkened by centuries. A mask of gold hid the face, but I could feel the gaze, steady, patient, eternal. The figure lifted one hand, curling its fingers slowly, beckoning. I woke with the taste of dust in my mouth and the echo of a voice in my head. By morning, the doorway stood open. I swear to you, I had sealed it the night before with boards and rope. The sand inside had been disturbed, and in that sand, clear as ink on parchment, were footprints, bare human footprints, leading inward. The opening swallowed me whole. The air was colder than the night outside, and yet it pressed heavy on my lungs, thick with something old enough to remember when the Nile ran wilder. My torch hissed when I lit it, its flame bending in strange ways, as if the tomb were breathing with me. The passage sloped downward, narrow enough that my shoulders brushed the walls. The stone here was carved with colors that had not faded, blues deep as midnight water, reds like the heart of a dying ember. The figures depicted here were not the triumphant gods or noble kings of the textbooks. These were watchers, tall, angular, with eyes stretched wider than nature intended. And everywhere, the image of a hand clutching a sun, squeezing it into darkness. Some of the panels had been mutilated, deep, violent scratches gouged across faces, words erased by force. Whoever had done this wanted a part of the story, to vanish. But here, nothing ever truly disappears. After what felt like hours, the passage widened. My torchlight touched the far wall first, and the sight froze my feet. A throne, carved from a single slab of black basalt, sat raised on a dais. Its arms ended not in lions, as tradition would suggest, but in talons, polished to a dull gleam. The seat was empty, or perhaps not. It was hard to tell, for behind it loomed 3 colossal figures. They were wrapped in linen the color of desert bone, their forms swollen in strange places, their shapes human, but not entirely. Each bore a golden death mask, the features impossibly serene, the eyes half-lidded, as if in lazy judgment. Before the throne lay 5 smaller forms. These were not encased in coffins, but lay bare on the stone floor. Linen clung to their thin frames, but their skulls were exposed, teeth grinning through cracked WRAPPINGS dot. It was only when I drew closer that I saw the inscription at my feet. The hieroglyphs read, "The children of the king do not sleep. They..." Wait. The words felt like they were being read aloud to me, not in my own mind, but from somewhere behind the throne. I turned, quick as a gasp, not no one. Only shadows. The silence here was not the absence of sound. It was a presence, thick and heavy, as if the chamber itself were listening. Deciding, I spoke, just to break it. My voice came back to me slow and strange, like it had taken the long way around. The torchlight flickered. For a heartbeat, only a heartbeat, I thought I saw linen twitch around the ankles of the smallest mummy. A tightening. A shift. Stepped back. My heel struck the lip of the dais. The stillness closed in again. I left without touching anything. That night, as I sat in my tent writing what I had seen, I heard a sound, a soft, dry rustling. I thought it was the wind. But then sand began to trickle from the corners of the tent. It gathered in the center, spilling into a small mound. And before my eyes, it shaped itself into the form of a seated figure. It sat for a moment, perfectly still. Then, without sound, it collapsed. The night outside was suddenly colder. Morning came pale and thin, like light strained through bone. I left the tomb behind for a time, telling myself I needed air, but truth be told, I needed answers. The nearest village was a scatter of mud brick homes clinging to the edge of the desert. The people there watched me, as though I had already done something unforgivable. Children hid behind their mothers. Men paused their work to let me pass in silence. Was an old woman named Nafisa, who finally stepped forward. Her back was bent, her hands veined like the cracked earth, and her eyes were sharp enough to cut truth from lies. "You've been where you should not go," she said before I could speak. Her voice had the dryness of sand and wind. I asked her what she meant, though part of me already knew. She invited me into her home, where the air was thick with the scent of burning resin. From a low shelf, she took a small wooden box, no larger than a loaf of bread. Inside lay a strip of brittle parchment, painted with images I had not seen in any museum. "This is Amun Sekhmet," she said, pointing to the figure of a crowned man whose eyes were ringed and black. "The king who ate the dawn. His reign was short, but his hunger was long. He sought to live forever, and so he made children, not born of women, but of war. Souls stolen from his enemies, bound into bodies woven of bone and reed. They were given faces of gold, so they would be loved and feared." She touched the image of 6 figures standing behind the king. "These are his children. They do not rest. They guard his promise that when the seal is broken, the blood of the one who opens it will call them back." Her gaze sharpened. "Do you carry his mark?" I hesitated, then pulled back my sleeve. There on my wrist lay the same curling glyph I had seen carved into the throne. A birthmark I had never understood. Ephisa's lips thinned. "Your blood is not innocent in this." I left her home with the feeling that something was walking in step behind me, though the street was empty. That night, the wind rose to a howl. A storm of sand rolled across the desert like a living thing. My tent strained against its ropes, the air inside thick with dust. When the storm passed, I stepped out to find every footprint erased, except one set. They led from the edge of camp toward the tomb. I followed, torch in hand, the desert unnervingly quiet after the storm's roar. The footprints descended the passage and into the chamber of the throne. There, at the foot of the stairs, lay the smallest of the 5 child mummies. It had been moved. I was certain of it. Its position now was closer to the exit, and its linen was dark in places, damp with something that gleamed under the torchlight. Not dust, not age. Something. Fresh. And the air smelled faintly of flowers again. Sweet, rotten, unshakable. I returned to the chamber with more torches than I needed, planting them in the cracks, between stones, so that every shadow had nowhere left to hide. The gold masks caught the light like trapped suns. For a long time, I simply stood before them, listening to the faint hiss of fire. The hieroglyphs on the floor seemed to shimmer when I read them aloud. My voice felt too loud here, each word rolling out slow and heavy, as if the chamber wanted to taste them. The air changed. It thickened, and the torch flames tilted away from the throne, as though something sat there now, breathing. Then the sound came, not a growl, not a scream, just the slow, deliberate tearing of linen. The masks turned toward me. Not quickly, not with violence, but with the inevitability of the tide. First one, then another, until all 3 colossal figures stood facing me. The 5 small mummies stirred next. They did not lunge. They simply rose, their movements soft and certain, as if they had always known this moment would come. Their bones whispered against their wrappings, each step a dry sigh. And then the visions came. Flashes, not in the torchlight, but in my skull. A battle under a blood-colored sun, spears sinking into flesh, rivers choked with the dead. And through it all, the king on his black throne, a crown of gold on his skull, his hollow eyes fixed on me. The throne cracked beneath that gaze. From within its base, a shape pushed forward, a vessel carved from obsidian, no bigger than a heart, yet pulsing faintly as though it were alive. The hieroglyphs on the walls began to align in my mind, their meaning suddenly clear. The vessel was bound to my bloodline. My ancestor, a high priest, had sealed Amun's sekhmet here, his life forfeit to the binding. That mark on my wrist was no birthmark. It was the echo of his oath. And now the tomb had not called me as an intruder. It had called me as an heir. The truth pressed into me like the desert heat. To end the curse, the vessel must be destroyed. But to destroy it was to break the chain between it and my body. And when that chain snapped, so would I. The children were close now. Their shadows fell over my feet. I took the vessel in both hands. It was warm, like skin. The pulse inside it beat in time with my own. A single thought held me there, trembling. If I let this stand, the king will walk again. The choice was no choice at all. I raised the vessel high and brought it down upon the basalt floor. It shattered with a sound like the breaking of bone. The air tore open. The mummies collapsed into dust mid-step, their gold masks striking the stone with hollow finality. The 3 towering guardians folded inward, their linen unraveling into nothing. The last thing I felt was not pain. It was a weight, a hand heavy with gold resting on my shoulder. I fell into darkness. They say the desert buries all. But centuries later, when a sandstorm scoured the valley clean, something was uncovered. A black basalt throne sitting alone under the sun. Upon it, a single golden mask stared toward the horizon. And though the wind was howling, its gaze did not waver. Waiting.